Imagine you challenge a flat earther to a debate, right?
Okay.
You're armed with like satellite photos, centuries of established geometry, and just this absolute unwavering confidence that you have physical reality entirely on your side.
Right. You figure this is going to be a total walk in the park.
Exactly. A quick educational smackdown. But then within literally 20 text messages, you are the one running away. You're hurling insults and you're demanding money for your time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. How does that even happen? Well, welcome to the deep dive.
It's honestly such a fascinating question, and it really speaks to a fundamental collapse in how we communicate about reality.
Right. And for you listening right now, our mission today isn't just to look at facts and figures. We are looking at an actual real-world text message transcript between two real people.
Yeah, on one side, we have a user who goes by the Dusty Truth, and he's advocating for a highly complex, alternative, flat Earth cosmology.
And on the other side?
On the other side is Bob the Science Guy, who is defending the mainstream heliocentric globe model.
And we should be clear up front, we are going to dissect this, not to figure out the shape of the Earth, but to figure out the shape of an argument.
Exactly. We are here to impartially analyze the exact claims, the rhetoric, and the frameworks presented in this source transcript.
Right, because our core focus today is really about the burden of proof. Specifically, this dynamic where if someone claims the mantle of scientist, if you enter a space acting as the undisputed arbiter of empirical truth and you call another viewpoint stupid, what are your obligations?
You carry the burden of falsifying that viewpoint using data.
Yes, you have to falsify it. You can't just enter a debate and then run from it, claiming it's a conspiracy theory when, you entered the debate in the first place.
Right, because if you claim the high ground of the scientific method, the expectation is that you will use the tools of that method. So, rigorous analysis, controlled variables, mathematical falsification.
To dismantle the claim.
Exactly. When you substitute those tools for ridicule, you don't just lose the argument, you fundamentally betray the scientific high ground you claim to stand on.
Okay, let's unpack this. The conversation starts with Dusty initiating contact. And frankly, considering the absolute dumpster fire that internet debates usually are, Dusty's opening is shockingly polite.
It really is.
He messages Bob, and I'm just going to read this here. He says, "Is this Bob the Science Guy? I just want to let you know, I watched a few of your videos. I do have some refutations."
The very standard opening.
Right. But then he says, "Also, I don't do name calling. I don't do yelling and screaming, and I don't marginalize people's intelligence based on their belief systems."
Look at the preemptive boundary setting happening right there.
Yeah, he's laying down the law.
He's highly self-aware. I mean, Dusty knows the typical trajectory of these online interactions. They always devolve into screamy matches within minutes.
Oh, totally.
So he is actively trying to construct a formal arena. He goes on to say, I simply argue the data, the science, the physics, and like to have a cordial conversation.
He's literally handing Bob a rulebook and just asking if he wants to play.
Yeah, and he even extends an olive branch. He tells Bob, I'm sure there's plenty that I can learn from you, and I'm sure there's plenty that you could learn from me.
Which is so rare to see online.
Right. Dusty explicitly states he is not looking for a hyper-aggressive debate, but a fluid conversation.
A fluid conversation, yeah. And he asks Bob for exclusive evidence. He wants to know what exclusive evidence leads Bob to believe the Earth is a spinning ball.
And that phrase, exclusive evidence, is going to be really important later.
Definitely. And I find this really interesting, too. Dusty acknowledges that Bob honestly believes his model. He's not calling Bob a shill or a liar. His position is just that there are missing steps that are not within the mainstream framework.
And that is a crucial distinction. Dusty approaches the interaction requesting a mutual exchange. He's framing this as, two explorers comparing maps.
Yeah, like let's look at the data together.
Right. He genuinely believes his alternative model is worthy of academic scrutiny, independent of the physical, mechanical models he thinks dominate the internet.
So Bob gets this incredibly polite, highly structured invitation to discuss physics. And Bob responds, "Sounds like fun. Let's have a chat and decide what to do."
Okay, great. The arena is set.
But then, almost in the exact same breath, Bob completely drops the hammer.
Oh, yeah, he does.
He states, the globe Earth is not a real question, and then he delivers this absolute brick wall of a statement. Flat Earth is a conspiracy theory, not an issue of science.
And right there, the foundation of the debate cracks before they even discuss a single data point.
Literally message 2.
Yeah. Bob approaches the interaction from a position of unassailable, established authority. By preemptively labeling Dusty's entire worldview a conspiracy theory, Bob is attempting to delegitimize the premise of the conversation he just agreed to have.
Exactly.
He's framing Dusty's skepticism not as scientific inquiry, but as this, psychological failing.
Wait, hold on, though. I have to play devil's advocate for a second here.
Go for it.
Isn't Bob kind of justified in being a little dismissive right out of the gate? I mean, if someone messages you and says, hey, I have some refutations for gravity, aren't you going to roll your eyes?
I mean, naturally, sure.
Why should Bob have to treat a settled, thousands of years old debate like it's a fresh, open question?
Because Bob agreed to the conversation.
Right.
If you genuinely believe the topic is just a psychological issue and not a matter of science, you don't agree to a conversation where the stated rules are to argue the data, the science, the physics.
It's a structural failure on his part.
Exactly. It's like agreeing to play a game of chess, but before making the first move, one player tells the other that moving the pawns is an illegal conspiracy.
Why sit at the board in the first place?
Right. If you don't want to debate the physics, don't say, sounds like fun, let's chat. But by stepping into the ring and, wearing the jersey of the science guy, Bob takes on the burden of proof.
Okay, I see what you mean. You can't show up to the tennis match and then complain that your opponent brought a racket.
Right.
So Dusty practically begs Bob to just give him the data. He asks, out of curiosity, which specific measurements would you point to as the strongest independent verification of the heliocentric model?
Which is a totally fair, open question.
It's a great question. He even adds, not looking to argue, genuinely want to know what you find most compelling. And Bob's response,
Sorry, that is tutoring.
Sorry, that is tutoring. It's an astonishing deflection.
Bob demands capitulation to his authority rather than providing the very evidence Dusty politely requested.
And Dusty pushes back beautifully.
Yeah.
He states his core philosophical hurdle. He says everything is a question. That's what science is.
Yep.
And he tells Bob, I haven't found any evidence that exclusively proves the globe. It's just an inverted kinematic equivalent of the flat Earth.
Okay, and that right there is where things get really deep.
Yeah, because you lost me at inverted kinematic equivalent. You're going to have to break that down for me, because that sounds like a phrase you'd use to win at Scrabble, not like a real physics concept.
Well, it is actually a profound concept in physics. So kinematics is just the study of motion.
Okay.
It's how things move without worrying about the forces that actually cause them to move.
Got it.
So imagine you are sitting on a train at a station. You look out the window and you see another train right next to yours.
Right.
Suddenly, you perceive movement. But for a split second, your brain cannot tell if your train is pulling forward or if the other train is backing up.
Oh, yeah, I've definitely felt that. It's kind of a dizzy feeling.
Exactly. The visual data, the kinematics, is exactly the same in both scenarios.
Okay, so the math works perfectly both ways, depending on what you assume is moving.
Precisely. Dusty is arguing that the mathematical models we use to describe a spinning globe orbiting a sun can, mathematically speaking, also be used to describe a stationary plane with the cosmos rotating above it. He's saying the mainstream model is just the inverted or flipped version of his model. The relative motion is identical.
So you can't use the apparent motion of the stars to prove the Earth is moving because a moving sky provides the exact same observational data.
You hit the nail on the head. That is a really solid philosophical point. It forces you to look for a different kind of proof.
Right, because if looking at the sky doesn't prove it exclusively, what does?
And that's where Bob realizes they are at a stalemate on the philosophy of motion. So he decides to get physical.
He dictates the terms and says, okay, so you want tutoring, start with a Foucault pendulum.
Yes, the Foucault pendulum. For those listening who haven't encountered it, it's basically the classical mainstream trump card for Earth's rotation.
How does it work?
Well, back in 1851, there was this French physicist named Léon Foucault. He hung a massive, heavy brass bob from a 200-foot wire inside the Pantheon in Paris.
Okay, 200 feet, that's huge.
Yeah, massive. And he let it swing. Now, if the Earth were perfectly stationary, that pendulum would just swing back and forth in the exact same line forever.
Right, just tracing a single line on the floor.
But over the course of the day, the line the pendulum traced in the sand slowly rotated clockwise.
Because the Earth was physically rotating underneath the swinging pendulum.
Precisely. The pendulum stays fixed in its plane of motion due to inertia, and the building, which is attached to the Earth, literally twists beneath it.
It's like turning a record player under a swinging weight.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
It was the first simple visual proof of the Earth's rotation.
Yeah.
So Bob throws this on the table and essentially says, explain that, flat earther.
And see, I fully expected Dusty to just say, like, oh, the pendulum has a hidden motor at the top, or just something totally dismissive.
Right, that's what you'd expect.
But he doesn't. Dusty hits back with a barrage of high-level historical physics. He brings up Ernst Mach. Dusty points out that Mach observed that the pendulum's behavior could be explained by the rotation of the universe around a stationary Earth. Dusty calls it ether drag.
And this is where Dusty proves he is not just reciting some internet script. He has deeply researched the history of science.
Who was Ernst Mach?
Ernst Mach was this brilliant 19th century physicist and philosopher, and his ideas actually heavily influenced Albert Einstein.
Wait, really? Einstein?
Yes. Mach developed what is now called Mach's principle. He argued that inertia, which is the resistance of an object to a change in its state of motion, is entirely determined by the distribution of all the mass in the universe.
Wait, so he was saying the stars millions of light years away are affecting a pendulum in Paris?
Under Mach's framework, yes, exactly. Mach argued that space itself is not just some absolute empty container.
Okay.
He said that if you took a bucket of water and spun it, the water creeps up the sides of the bucket, right? Because it's rotating relative to the fixed stars.
Yeah, centrifugal force.
But, incredibly, Mach theorized that if you could hold the bucket perfectly still and somehow rotate the entire universe around it, the water would still creep up the sides of the stationary bucket.
Just from the gravitational drag of everything spinning around it.
Exactly. Because the massive gravitational influence of the spinning universe would drag on the water.
Oh my God.
And Dusty is weaponizing this very real, highly respected historical theory against Bob.
Dusty is saying, Bob, your pendulum doesn't exclusively prove the Earth rotates. According to Ernst Mach, if the Earth is completely stationary, but the massive dome of the stars is rotating above us, that rotating starry mass would create an ether drag that would pull the pendulum in a circle anyway.
The kinematics are mathematically indistinguishable.
That is a wildly sophisticated rhetorical counterpunch.
It really is. Dusty isn't denying the observation of the pendulum. He's showing that the mainstream interpretation is just one of multiple possible interpretations.
He's saying you don't have exclusive evidence.
Right. And he doesn't stop there. He brings up transverse waves.
Yeah, he argues that mainstream science claims light waves are self-propagating through a vacuum, but he suggests they might actually be moving through a physical ether medium.
And he claims this rotating ether is what causes gyroscopes to experience a 15-degree-per-hour drift.
Not the Earth moving, but the ether moving.
Yep. And then Dusty just drops the Michelson-Morley experiment on Bob.
Which is another huge one. Remind us what that is.
The Michelson-Morley experiment is another massive historical touchstone. So back in 1887, scientists assumed space was filled with this invisible substance called the luminiferous ether.
Right, the stuff light was supposed to travel through.
Exactly, just like sound travels through air. Since they believed the Earth was hurtling through this ether around the sun, they expected to be able to measure an ether wind, a resistance.
Like sticking your hand out the window of a moving car, you feel the wind pushing back against you?
That's a perfect analogy. So Albert Michelson and Edward Morley built this incredibly sensitive device called an interferometer.
What does that do?
It basically split a beam of light, sent the two beams off at 90-degree angles, bounced them off mirrors, and brought them back together. Okay. The idea was that if the Earth was rushing through the ether, the light beam moving against the wind should have taken slightly longer to return than the beam moving sideways.
But they didn't find anything, right? That's the famous null result.
Exactly. The light returned at the exact same time. It was a complete crisis in physics. The Earth didn't appear to be moving through an ether at all.
So how did mainstream science deal with that?
Well, eventually they resolved it by abandoning the ether entirely and adopting Einstein's special relativity, which basically says light travels at a constant speed in a vacuum, regardless of the observer's motion.
But Dusty looks at that exact same historical moment, the exact same data, and draws a completely different conclusion.
Yeah, he does.
Dusty basically says mainstream science got a null result when trying to measure the Earth's movement, and instead of just accepting the obvious, that the Earth is stationary, they invented a massive math trick to erase the ether entirely.
And Dusty explicitly tells Bob, there is a framework in mainstream science. They stay within their framework, and it is self-limiting to science.
He's engaging in high-level philosophy of science here.
Oh, totally. Whether you agree with his physics or not, his rhetorical framework is incredibly sound. He is invoking the concept of falsification.
He's basically saying you are looking at this data through the lens of a spinning globe in a vacuum, but there is an entirely different lens, a stationary Earth surrounded by a rotating ether that also perfectly accounts for Foucault's pendulum, gyroscopic drift, and the Michelson-Morley null result.
Exactly.
So Bob is faced with an opponent who understands Mach's principle, the history of the ether, and the Michelson-Morley interferometer.
Yes.
How does Bob, the self-proclaimed science guy, respond to this highly detailed counter-argument? Does he explain why Mach's principle doesn't apply? Does he break down special relativity for him?
No, not at all. Bob says, nope, we use data and facts. Sometimes it surprises us. Stop quoting names to me.
Memes.
Yeah. And when Dusty sends a voice message further elaborating on the physics, Bob replies, just looked 3. Standard flurf script.
Standard flurf script.
Yep.
Flurf being, a derogatory internet slang term for a flat earther. He literally resorts to name calling.
Let's just call this rhetorical tactic what it actually is, the label and dismiss.
Right?
When faced with an argument that operates completely outside of his comfortable, established paradigm, Bob cannot muster the cognitive flexibility to dismantle the actual physics Dusty presented.
He just refuses.
So instead, he categorizes the argument as a mean and a script. Because by labeling it a script, Bob absolves himself of the responsibility to actually analyze it. It's just a defense mechanism to protect his authority.
Dusty's reaction to this is completely justified based on the rules they established at the very beginning of the chat.
Absolutely.
Dusty says, all right, so you're just disrespectful and you're going to ignore science. But you're Bob the science guy, when science is about asking questions, not about appealing to authority.
Such a strong response.
And then he tells him, I told you I don't do disrespect, I don't do name-calling, and I don't do arguing. You've broken the rules. Clearly, you are not interested in the truth.
And Bob's reply to that.
Just cuck.
Wow. The arrogance is palpable.
It really is.
But it also signals a pivot in Bob's strategy, right? Bob realizes he is going to win a philosophical argument about relativistic frameworks and the history of the ether.
Dusty is too read up on it.
Exactly. So he decides to retreat to what he assumes is safer ground. He tries to test Dusty's mathematical literacy.
Right. It's like if you can't beat them on philosophy, force them to take a pop quiz.
Yep.
Bob tries to prove that Dusty simply doesn't understand the basic geometry of a sphere. Bob throws down a mathematical gauntlet. He asks, answer a simple question. At 8 inches per mile squared, what is the calculated curve at 14 mile?
And he adds, condescendingly, before you can say something is wrong, you have to understand it.
The nerve.
This is what I call the illusion of the pop quiz. Bob just assumes that because Dusty holds an alternative cosmology, Dusty must be mathematically illiterate.
Now, this 8 inches per mile squared formula, what exactly is that?
It's a parabolic approximation. It's just a quick mental shortcut used by surveyors to estimate how far the surface of a sphere drops away from a horizontal tangent line over relatively short distances.
So basically, if I stand on a flat beach and look straight ahead, how far does the ground curve down below my eye line for every mile I look out?
Exactly. So Bob thinks he has laid a trap. But Dusty completely undercuts the assumption.
Oh, he nails it. Dusty accurately replies that for a 14-mile, it's only about half an inch of drop. He notes it's practically within a margin of measurement error.
And he literally breaks down the math for Bob, which is hilarious.
He does. He shows that squaring a fraction smaller than 1 to 0.25 miles results in an even smaller fraction, 0.0625.
Yeah.
And he asks Bob, so is that where you were trying to trick me into not understanding how to square a fraction?
I love that so much. Dusty is like, did you really just try to hit me with 4th grade fractions?
It completely forces Bob to escalate.
Right, because Bob realizes Dusty actually has quantitative literacy. So Bob walks Dusty into a complex multi-step word problem to try and trip him up.
Bob asks, now if I had a 100-foot building at 10 miles, how much should I see? From 6 feet.
Meaning a 6-foot-tall observer is looking at a 100-foot building 10 miles away. How much of that building is hidden behind the physical curve of the Earth?
And Dusty goes right to work, like a student taking an SAT.
It's impressive.
First, Dusty calculates the distance to the horizon. Because the observer is 6 feet tall, they can see some distance before the curve actually starts hiding things.
Right.
Dusty takes the 6-foot observer height, multiplies it by 1.5, gets 9, and takes the square root of that to get exactly 3 miles to the horizon.
Let's pause there for a second because it is vital to recognize what just happened.
What's that?
Dusty didn't just guess. He used a standard geometric heuristic, the square root of the observer's height multiplied by 1.5 to find the actual horizon distance in miles. Dusty understands the internal mechanics of the globe model perfectly well.
Exactly. He knows the rules of Bob's game. Then Dusty takes the remaining 7 miles, because the building is 10 miles away, minus the 3 miles to the horizon, right?
Right.
He squares that 7 to get 49. He multiplies 49 miles squared by the 8 inches of drop to get 392 inches. He divides by 12 to convert it to feet, getting roughly 32.6 feet of hidden height.
And then he subtracts that from the 100-foot building and says about 67.3 feet should be visible, minus whatever atmospheric refraction does.
And Bob is forced to validate the flat earther's math.
He has to. Bob says, yep, not the 32 feet you thought originally.
But Bob is clearly annoyed that Dusty survived the pop quiz, so he swings for the fences.
He brings up the Willis Tower in Chicago.
Right. He says it is 1,450 feet high, the observer is across the lake in Michigan at 180 feet of elevation, and the distance is 53 miles. Bob asks, should we see it on the globe?
And Dusty just goes right back to the calculator.
Yeah. He takes the 180-foot observer height, does the math, and finds the horizon is about 16.4 miles away. He subtracts that from the 53 total miles, leaving about 36.5 miles of curvature to account for. He squares that, multiplies by 8, divides by 12, and calculates that about 111 feet would be hidden.
And here's where Dusty makes mechanical error and Bob absolutely pounces on it.
Wait, what did he do wrong?
Well, Bob corrects him, stating that actually about 888 feet of the building should be hidden, with almost 700 feet visible, though less due to standard refraction.
How did Dusty get 111 and Bob got 888? That's a huge difference.
It was just order of operations. Dusty squared the 36.5 miles to get roughly 1,337, but then he divided by 12 before multiplying by the 8 inches.
Oh.
Yeah, if you do 1,337 times 8 inches first, you get 10,696 inches. Divide that by 12, you get roughly 891 feet. Bob caught him in an arithmetic error. Bob's math was correct within the framework of the globe model.
Okay, so Bob finally gets a win. Bob proved the math, says a massive chunk of that building should be hidden behind a physical curve. Case closed, right?
Well, you would think so. But listen to how Dusty reacts to being mathematically corrected.
Right, he doesn't get defensive.
He doesn't get angry at all. He says, but I can just use the calculator. And although I appreciate the lesson, we can both find the same answers to the same questions. The important thing is that we have the right answer, and then we can compare the right answer to observations.
Wow.
Dusty is making a profound epistemological point here. Doing math on a piece of paper doesn't magically manifest reality.
Okay, I'm going to push back hard on Dusty here, though.
Okay, let's hear it.
If the math says 888 feet of the building should be hidden, and you go out to Lake Michigan and 888 feet of the building is actually hidden, isn't that proof of the curve?
Well, it is proof that the observation matches the mathematical prediction. But Dusty argues that mathematical models can be artificially mapped onto different physical realities. First, he attacks the refraction coefficient. Mainstream science knows that sometimes you can see way more of the Willis Tower than the math allows.
Like on certain weather days?
Yes. And to explain this, science uses atmospheric refraction, the idea that the atmosphere bends the light around the physical curve of the Earth.
So the light bends over the water.
Right. But Dusty calls this out as a fudge factor. He claims refraction only accounts for 7 to 10% of hidden height under normal conditions, and that claiming refraction bends images up over thousands of feet of physical curvature is, in his words, beyond provable reality.
So Dusty is saying when the math fails, you guys just invent magic bending light to save your globe.
Exactly. And then Dusty introduces his own physical explanation for why the bottoms of buildings disappear over water.
What's his alternative?
He brings in perspective convergence and angular resolution. He argues that things shrink as they increase in distance.
Well, yeah, obviously.
But he says the angle of the light entering your eye becomes too narrow to resolve the bottom of the object, where it meets the ground. He is asking how we know we aren't just confusing the natural limits of human vision with a physical mechanical curve of dirt and water.
That is fascinating. And this leads to Dusty dropping what I honestly think is the most devastating critique of the entire debate.
Oh, the closed-loop system comment.
Yes. He tells Bob, every single proof of the globe is a closed-loop system that always circles back to unproven assumptions.
This is the red-tinted glasses metaphor.
Break that down for me.
Okay, imagine I force you to wear a pair of glasses with red lenses. I then point to a perfectly white wall and say, look, the wall is red.
And I'd say, no, I'm wearing red glasses.
Right. But then I reply, let's test it. I'll take a photo with a camera that has a red filter, and I'll use a spectrometer specifically calibrated to red.
So every tool you use is built on the assumption of red.
Exactly. Dusty is arguing that the math of spherical coordinates is the red glasses.
He actually explains this using the concept of a spherical dome of vision, which I found incredible.
Yeah, tell us about that.
He says that if you stand on a perfectly flat plane, your vision functions like a dome around you. And if you map that visual dome using math, you multiply 60 nautical miles per degree by the 360 degrees of a circle.
And that gets you 21,600 nautical miles.
Which happens to be the exact circumference of the Earth in the globe paradigm.
Exactly. Dusty is arguing that mainstream science literally reverse-engineered the limits of human vision on a flat plane, turned that visual dome into a physical ball, and now claims we live on it.
It's wild. He tells Bob, you know that you can take spherical coordinates to measure a building, but that doesn't mean the building is a sphere. It's just a coordinate system.
It's a mind-bending argument. He views the globe as an inverted model. And Bob's response to this deeply philosophical point about coordinate mapping.
Let me guess, he ignores it.
Pretty much. Bob says, okay, again, past that. Bottom line, all measurements and observations match the globe. Why do you think everyone is wrong?
Oh.
Bob completely ignores the closed-loop system critique.
It's infuriating. Bite is essentially saying, the red glasses prove the wall is red because all my red instruments say so. He just refuses to engage with the possibility that his instruments are biased.
So if math becomes a philosophical deadlock, what happens when they look at physical images? Let's look at how Bob tries to play his ultimate trump card.
Oh, this part. Frustrated by the math stalemate, Bob attempts to just end the debate with an appeal to brute reality.
Right.
He sends an image of the Earth taken from space, specifically from the Artemis mission, and he states definitively that is a globe, period.
Which, for 99.9% of the population, is game over. You show me a picture of the thing, I believe the thing exists.
Right, but Dusty entirely rejects the photograph.
He does.
He calls it a cartoon from NASA and states an image is not science. He asks Bob, where is South America? Implying the image is just a flawed composite.
Now, to the average listener, rejecting a photo seems like pure denialism.
Yeah, it sounds crazy.
But philosophically, it tracks perfectly with Dusty's worldview. Have you ever read the philosopher Jean Baudrillard?
Oh, the guy who wrote about simulacra.
Yes. Baudrillard wrote about the simulacra copies of things that no longer have an original reality. To Dusty, a NASA photograph is a simulacrum.
It's just a digital artifact.
Exactly. It is an artifact produced by an institution operating entirely within the closed-loop system he just criticized. He tells Bob, they said it's a photo from Artemis. It doesn't mean it's actually a photo from Artemis. You're believing them without any second thought.
So if Dusty won't accept a photograph because he thinks it's a digital painting, what kind of empirical data does he accept?
Right, that's the question.
And this is where the debate takes a wild turn into high-level magnetism.
Oh, the magnetic data.
Dusty cites specific IGRF data, that's the International Geomagnetic Reference Field.
Yes, and we really need to unpack this because Dusty gets incredibly granular here. Mainstream science often simplifies the Earth's magnetic field by describing it as a dipole.
Right. Think of a standard bar magnet you'd put on your fridge. One north end, one south end. The magnetic field lines loop symmetrically from one end to the other.
But the real Earth isn't a perfect bar magnet, right?
No, not at all. The real Earth has a messy, complex magnetic field. It possesses quadrupole and octupole components.
So if a dipole is a simple bar magnet, imagine a quadrupole is taking two bar magnets and squishing them together side by side, but facing opposite directions.
The magnetic field lines get warped, pushed, and incredibly complex.
Exactly. And Dusty claims that the Earth's quadrupole component is 2.7 times higher than a standard bar magnet model actually predicts.
And he brings the receipts. He cites specific nanotesla measurements, a nanotesla being a unit of magnetic field strength.
He really has the numbers ready.
He says the Arctic is measuring at 62,000 NT, the Antarctic at 43,000 NT, and the equator down between 28,000 and 30,000 NT.
He is demonstrating that there is a massive magnetic asymmetry between the north and south poles, that a simple spinning magnetic ball struggles to perfectly explain.
And he doesn't just throw numbers out, he builds a comprehensive alternative model out of them.
He proposes that we live in a level topographical dielectric atomic torus field.
Okay, I need a translation on that. Dielectric atomic torus field. That sounds like the power source for a spaceship in a sci-fi movie.
I know, it sounds intense, but a torus is just a mathematical term for a donut shape.
Okay.
And dielectric refers to a material that is an electrical insulator but can be polarized by an applied electric field.
So he's essentially arguing that instead of living on a solid ball in an empty vacuum, we live on a flat plane surrounded by a massive donut-shaped electromagnetic energy field.
Yes, and he claims the sky is a magnetic bottle perfect for plasma confinement.
Which is another massive scientific pull. Plasma confinement is a real cutting-edge physics concept.
Tell us about that.
If you are building a nuclear fusion reactor, a tokamak, you are creating plasma that is hotter than the sun. You cannot let that plasma touch the physical walls of the reactor or it will melt them instantly.
Right.
So you create a magnetic bottle, a cage made purely of intense magnetic fields to suspend the plasma in midair.
Wait, Dusty is taking the mechanics of a multi-billion-dollar fusion reactor and mapping it onto the sky above us.
Yes. He is proposing that the luminaries we see in the sky, the stars, maybe the sun and moon, are essentially plasma phenomena contained within the incredibly complex quadrupole magnetic field of the Earth.
Wow.
He suggests that the southern hemisphere sky is literally a magnetic mirror of the northern one at the observer's meridian.
That is breathtakingly imaginative. But more importantly, whether you think a sky donut of plasma is crazy or not, it is a highly specific, falsifiable data claim.
Yes. Dusty has presented the 2.7 quadrupole variance, the nanotesla measurements, and a mechanical alternative.
And we must return to the mission of our deep dive here. The burden of proof for the self-proclaimed scientist. Bob entered this debate saying, "Sounds like fun." Dusty just handed him a massive, detailed numerical hypothesis about planetary magnetism. How does the scientist respond to this specific empirical data?
He ignores it completely.
Completely.
Bob replies, again, not why is science wrong? He refuses to even acknowledge the word quadrupole.
Unbelievable.
Instead, Bob sends a voice message outlining the 5 characteristics of science denial. He accuses Dusty of cherry-picking, conspiratorial thinking, promotion of fake experts, poor deductive reasoning, and an inappropriate expectation of perfection from science.
It is the ultimate intellectual cop-out. Bob literally tells Dusty, your time is better spent learning about this from actual experts than parroting some flurf daddies on TikTok.
He called him a flurf daddy.
Yes.
If someone presents data that you think is completely ridiculous, but you enter the debate as the science expert, shouldn't you dismantle the data rather than attacking the person? If Bob is right, all he has to do is say, Dusty, the quadrupole variance exists, but here is how the dynamo effect in the Earth's molten core perfectly accounts for those nanotesla readings.
Exactly. But doing that requires actual scientific labor. It requires Bob to know the physics of the molten core and magnetic asymmetries. By declaring it not a scientific discussion, Bob relieves himself of the burden of using the scientific method. He just retreats into dogmatism.
And Dusty specifically calls him out on this failure. Dusty writes, I've presented the IGRF asymmetry data, the Michelson-Morley null result, the Ernst-Mach observation on the pendulum. You haven't engaged any of it. If my position is as easily falsifiable as you suggest, falsify it. That's how science works.
That's the core of this whole thing.
Dusty even pleads with him logically. Let's say I'm the least intelligent person in the world, and somehow I have figured something out. Does my intelligence level diminish the value of my observation? This is why you need to engage with the science and not the rhetoric.
It is a masterclass in staying on target by Dusty and an absolute total collapse of scientific communication by Bob.
Bob is totally cornered by his own inability to explain the magnetic data, so he makes one final, desperate attempt to mathematically trap Dusty using the Earth's equator.
Which brings us to the final showdown. Bob decides to use a tactic called proof by contradiction.
Proof by contradiction is a classic mathematical and logical tool. You assume the premise of your opponent is true, you follow that premise to its logical conclusion, and you show that the conclusion contradicts known reality.
Right, thereby proving the original premise must be false.
So Bob starts simple. He asks, the circumference of a circle is pi x diameter, correct? Dusty says yes.
Then Bob establishes the premise based on the standard map most flat earthers use, which is called the azimuthal equidistant projection.
That's the one that looks like the UN logo, right? Where the North Pole is in the center and Antarctica is an ice ring around the outside edge.
Right. Bob asks if, on that flat map, the equator is a fixed distance from the North Pole. Dusty agrees. He states the equator is 90 degrees of latitude away from the pole.
Okay.
At roughly 69.11 miles per degree, that distance, the radius from the pole to the equator, is roughly 6,220 miles.
And here's the trap. Bob says, okay, if the radius of the flat map to the equator is 6,220 miles, calculate the circumference of the equator.
The formula is 2 times pi times the radius.
Right, so 2 times 3.14 times 6,220 miles yields a circumference of roughly 39,061 miles.
And Bob knows, and every surveyor knows, that the actual physical measurement of the Earth's equator is roughly 24,901 miles.
Oh.
So Bob springs a trap. Your flat map requires a 39,000-mile equator, but reality only has a 24,000-mile equator. Your model is mathematically falsified by 15,000 miles. It's a contradiction. Boom.
In a world governed purely by physical Euclidean geometry, that is a devastating checkmate against that specific piece of paper.
Yes, it is.
But Dusty refuses the trap. He completely rejects the premise that the azimuthal map is a literal one-to-one physical blueprint of space.
He argues that the map inherently contains distortion. He says, there's the distortion because all matter expands as it moves away from the center, so every line of latitude is the same circumference.
Which is an incredibly strange physical claim, that matter physically expands as it moves outward, but rhetorically it dodges the trap.
Dusty is saying the map is just a projection, an optical representation, not physical reality.
But then Dusty does something even more radical. Seeing that Bob is obsessed with physical geometry, Dusty completely shifts the fundamental paradigm of the entire debate.
He goes ontological.
Yeah, he claims the realm we live in is not a physical, mechanical reality at all. He claims it is a substrate of light and sound.
We have literally crossed the Rubicon from physics into ontology.
Ontology.
Yes. Ontology is the branch of philosophy dealing with the fundamental nature of being and reality. Dusty breaks down etymology to make his point.
No, this part was wild.
He tells Bob that human literally means light man, and the word person comes from personam, meaning through sound.
Oh, come on. I have to stop you there. Human. We're doing word magic now. Etymology isn't physics. Bob must have been pulling his hair out. Dusty has completely lost the plot here, right?
To a materialist engineer like Bob, yes, it sounds like absolute madness. But we have to look at why Dusty is doing this. Dusty tells Bob, everything in this realm is of the light. This is where special relativity comes from. Everything is relative to the observer. So you're trying to measure it from outside the system when all measurements have to be done from the point of the observer.
So Dusty is saying reality is basically a hologram.
Essentially, yes. Dusty is arguing that the universe is an observer-dependent optical phenomenon. It's all waves processed into physical reality through your senses, he says.
So it's not a box we live inside.
Right. Dusty has moved the goalposts from a physical wooden box, which is how he describes Bob's worldview, to a subjective, quantum-esque perceptual rendering.
And that completely neutralizes Bob's equator math. You cannot mathematically falsify an optical illusion or a plasma projection using the geometry of a solid physical sphere.
Yep.
You can't measure a rainbow with a tape measure.
Exactly. Bob is functioning as an architect, trying to measure the load-bearing capacity of a bridge. Dusty is functioning as a philosopher, questioning if the bridge even exists outside of our mental rendering of it.
Dusty even warns Bob about this mismatch. He says, see how you have been trained to ignore all possibilities. I'm explaining the system and you are trying to force it into your framework, and I'm telling you it does not fit.
With the two participants operating in entirely different dimensions of reality, one with a tape measure, the other with etymology and observer mechanics, the conversation faces a catastrophic collapse.
Having executed his mathematical proof by contradiction, Bob decides he has won. He doesn't engage with the etymology of human or the philosophy of an observer-centric light substrate.
He doesn't even bother to ask Dusty what he means by matter expanding.
He simply types, does 39061 equals 24901? He declares, that is called proof by contradiction.
And then Bob literally flees the scene.
He does. He types, take care, your flat earth was just falsified. And then he adds this incredibly arrogant parting shot. Later, that was a free tutoring session. Next one is $50 since you want to argue. And finally, we are done here.
Let's bring this back to the core focus of our deep dive. Bob entered a debate voluntarily. He stepped into the ring. But when faced with an opponent who refused to submit to his fundamental premises, an opponent who questioned the validity of photographs, who demanded physical explanations for historical anomalies like the Michelson-Morley experiment, who brought highly specific quadrupole magnetic data to the table, Bob's scientific rigor completely evaporated.
He labeled the opposing view a conspiracy immediately to avoid the work.
Yep.
He used ad hominem attacks like Flurf Daddy.
Yeah.
He never once provided the exclusive evidence Dusty politely asked for in message 1.
Never did.
And when he couldn't force Dusty to submit to his geometry, he ran away and demanded $50.
Dusty, conversely, adhered strictly to the rules of engagement he established.
No name calling.
Right. He remained polite. He asked for exclusive evidence. He provided alternative, highly researched data points. He actively sought falsification. He didn't resort to name-calling once.
Which is why Dusty gets the final word in the transcript, and why he walks away feeling totally vindicated. He tells Bob, "I haven't argued at all. You're just emotionally attached to a worldview, which is not how science should work."
Which is a brilliant observation.
He correctly points out that Bob is shadowboxing with an incorrect assumption, a straw man of what Dusty actually believes.
The irony is tragic. The person claiming to represent science and empirical truth refused to engage with actual, highly detailed data.
By opting to attack a straw man and hurl insults, Bob inadvertently validated Dusty's core belief that mainstream science is a fragile, closed-loop system dogmatically protected by people who cannot defend it from outside their narrow framework.
Bob didn't just fail to change Dusty's mind. He armed Dusty with the absolute conviction that the experts are faking it.
Think about the massive failure of that interaction. If you claim the high ground of science, do you lose it the moment you resort to name-calling and retreating?
I'd say yes.
If somebody says they are a scientist and they call another person's model stupid, they are ethically and intellectually bound to falsify it. Entering a debate and then running from it, claiming it's just a conspiracy theory, is a profound betrayal of the scientific method.
It is a stark reminder for you listening right now that knowledge is only powerful when you understand why you hold it. Sure. We cannot rely simply on the fact that an expert told us the Earth is a globe or that NASA published a photograph.
Right, because if someone challenges you, you have to know the actual physics.
If we cannot defend our foundational models against scrutiny, even deeply unconventional sky donut scrutiny, without getting defensive, our understanding is incredibly shallow. Dismissing opponents as stupid without doing the hard, tedious work of dismantling their specific claims only proves to them that you don't actually have the answers.
You end up becoming the exact arrogant archetype they are rebelling against in the first place.
Exactly.
So, to summarize our deep dive today, we looked at a conversation that started with the promise of a cordial, fluid exchange of data. Instead, we witnessed a spectacular clash of fundamentally incompatible frameworks.
We saw how a Foucault pendulum, a 19th century light experiment, and the very concept of atmospheric refraction can be interpreted entirely differently depending on your foundational assumptions about reality.
We saw a debate centered on physics mutate into a debate about the philosophy of coordinate systems, and eventually into the ontology of light and sound.
But most importantly, we saw a masterclass in how not to conduct science communication. Bearing the title of scientist requires the patience to dismantle bad ideas with better data.
In an age of endless information, we all carry our own models of reality. We all live inside our own spherical domes of vision, filtering data through our own biases and assumptions.
And we all think our dome is the real one.
So here's a final thought for you to chew on. The next time you find yourself entirely baffled by someone else's worldview and you feel the urge to just call them an idiot and walk away, ask yourself, are you trying to measure their optical reality using a physical ruler from yours? And if you are, who is really the one trapped in a closed-loop system?